Thank you. Good morning. My name is David Baker. I'm a state representative here in Willmar and Kansas County. I have been serving this area. I'm just entering, about halfway through my 5th year now. I've really enjoyed it. I sit on a number of committees like Energy and Climate, Education Policy, Health and Human Services, and I just got appointed to the Jobs Committee in the House because there was some shuffling going on with former House member went to the Senate, Representative Rarick,
yeah.
And so we did some shuffling there, and so I'm very busy with a lot of committees and ready to be home for our Easter Passover break. So it's great to be here. Thank you, Lydia, for having us and everybody for doing all this good stuff. Thank you.
My name is Senator Andrew Lang. I am from Willmar, or just east of Willmar. I grew up. I actually graduated from Willmar High School. I went to Ridgewater for a couple of years. I went to St. Cloud after that. Got a degree. Went into the Army. Spent. I'm in. What am I in now? 17 years almost.
I don't know. Don't ask me.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Well, I've been and I represent. So Dave and I share half of the district. This is the B side. Excuse me. I always try to call it the A side, but it's the B side because A comes from the left always. But so my district starts pretty much by Howick, where Dave's does, and I go all the way out to Appleton, down to Granite Falls, down to Fairfax, and then back up to Howick again. So the 4 counties are the vast majority of the 4 counties. Let's see some of the committees I sit on, and I know you guys asked for some bill numbers and stuff like that. So Megan printed that stuff off. So I'll try to. It's hard to keep track of all the stuff we've done off the floor this year, but let's see committees. I sit on the vice chair of vets, since there isn't a whole lot of us vets in the legislature. So I sit on ag finance. I sit on ag policy. I sit on environment policy with legacy finance in one group, which is kind of confusing, but part of that reasoning is I also sit on Lessard Sams, which is the legacy. You guys all know what the legacy amendment is. It's 3% sales tax that ends up in like $300 million a year that we get to put into the environment and a bunch of good projects. So, and then new for this year, I sit on transportation. So a transportation committee has been a lot of work. If any of you have been paying attention to the hands-free cell phone bill, we worked really hard on that bill, trying to get that thing drafted and make it so people can still have their lives and have their communications and do so in a safe manner. I hope that bill. And the funny thing is, at the end of it, we're going to have to probably tweak that as we go and make sure that as technology, changes in the future, and as this little thing changes in the future, we're going to have to try to cope with that. And you get a bunch of old guys and gals in St. Paul that don't know a whole lot about technology like you guys do. We're going to have to do that. So, but yeah, that's kind of me and the way that this year's gone so far.
All right. I think for the sake of time, we're just going to have the homeless kids introduce themselves and say what grade you're in and what school you go to and your name. And then if that's okay with our guests. Okay, so
I'm Christina. I'm in grade 11 and I go to the high school.
Willmar School?
Yes.
Willmar School.
Okay, I'm Celeste, and I go to the high school, and I'm in 10th grade. Nice to meet you.
I'm Lydia. I go to the Willmar Senior High School and I'm 11th grade.
I'm Philip Iversley. I'm in 12th grade and I go to New London Spicer.
Excellent.
I'm Miles and I go to the high school in 10th grade.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm Jacob. I go to Junior County and I'm in 12th grade.
I am Jasper. I go to New London Spicer High School and I am in 11th grade.
Awesome. So just a few things. So we have a time limit, but it's not going to be very strictly enforced. It's just to make sure we're moving along schedule so we get to everything that we want to talk about and honor your guys' time. And we know that you have another thing starting at 9 a.m. So we want to be done here by 8:50 so you can move on to that.
Thank you.
So like in committees, testifiers have limits. And so we just want to make sure that we are focusing on the things that we want to talk about.
Sure.
I'll be the mediator today, and so I'm just going to be moving us from topic topic to topic. We have our people asking questions. We have Jacob's asking a question, Philip's asking a question, and then Miles. And the sheet says Grace, but she is not here this morning, so Tina will be asking her question. So the first thing.
Excuse me, are you going to kind of flip back and forth then too? So who starts first? And we'll
Yes.
just-
I believe that's on your sheet.
Oh, it is. Oh,
Yeah, you will be
center line.
answering
Got
2
it.
questions.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
On to our first topic, the renewal of the provider tax for healthcare. Jacob, do you want to start that? And you guys will have 3 minutes to answer the first question for this.
Plenty of time.
Senator Lang, do you support the 2% provider tax renewal for healthcare expansion?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm going to answer with yes and no. Of course, I'm right. That's the most politician answer ever, but it's true because you know, and this is just for everybody in the room and everybody listening, that the provider tax was something that was done for supposed to be in a short period of time, and like in the short period of the legislature that I've been there, I've realized in a quick hurry that a lot of the stuff we do is trying to fix what prior legislators have done or done so with good intentions. That is supposed to sunset. So the 2% that you all pay when you go to the doctor and the doctors pay in kind to the state is set to, I'm already that far in, sorry, is set to sunset in, I think it's actually this year.
At the end of this year.
End of this year. So that's great, fine. It's less taxes for everybody. Of course, we want to say that, but the problem is it leaves almost, I think it was $638 million, $700 million hole in our healthcare system. So, how do we deal with that, and how do we, at the legislature, try to compensate for a $700 million hole? Which I know we talk about big numbers often, but even in the state sense, that's a big number. And I have kind of been open about it. I want the tax to go away. Obviously, I want people to pay less, but I know that if you throw a big lead weight into a pool, the water's going to come over the edge, and I don't want that to happen. So what we've been talking about is stepping that down, doing a 0.5% a year and trying to compensate for it in the meantime. So that's a really complicated question to actually really complicated answer to a complicated question. But yeah, I guess I can say yes and no. I'm worried. I am in support of a removal of tax, of course, but I'm worried about the implications of it. And I think that hopefully, I think most of the people in the legislature are kind of having that same a little bit of heartache about a $700 million hole. We have doctors in the legislature, and both those doctors have differing opinions. You know, so even with people within the community are a little bit conflicted on how we're going to deal with it. But that's kind of my 2 cents.
Great. And then we can move on to the same question for Representative Baker. Jacob, you just want to repeat it once.
And I'm sorry. I have to admit, Dave sits on Health and Human Services. I don't sit on Health and Human Services, so we do bounce off each other quite a bit when we talk after a session or after. Actually, what we do is we talk along on the drive home. So he's driving to Willmar, I'm driving to Olivia, and we're on the phone talking about things that we were just saying before we walked in here on how the legislature is a crazy, crazy place. And I don't even know who the legislative assistants are in the, because I'm not there. I don't know, and I'm busy with ag, so I'm glad that Dave has a little bit more insight on some of the Health and Human Services stuff than I do, but and I appreciate that we talked to. So.
And again, I think I got the question. We can save some time there. The 2% provider tax, again, I would echo a lot of what Andrew was saying. I think that we want to see that end, but in reality, it's $700 million. We just can't sort of pretend it to go away. So as a Health and Human Services finance member, we have about 20 members on this committee, and the Democrats who are in charge now in the House this year we've heard a lot of bills this year, and we also was presented to us a 1,000-page omnibus healthcare bill, the biggest in state history of one issue. So that's how complicated healthcare is. We can make fun about how big it is because we all said, hey, what about let's get rid of these omnibus bills? But I don't know that anybody, as much as we want to get rid of them, we really can't. It's difficult because there's so many bills that are good ideas in this bill. I want to see it end. I don't know that we can, but I also like the idea of stepping it down. But right now, if it did turn off this year, because that's what they negotiated at the end, the senior leaders, the governor, the majority leader in the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, if they really just say, look, let's just end it now, but we gotta come back next year. There is plenty of money in this fund to not hurt us right away, at least for a year or two. However, again, we don't wanna kick it down the road, this issue that we gotta deal with. But we also find ways of lowering the cost of healthcare, which I think is the underlying problem here. If we open up transparency to what pharmaceutical companies are charging us and how much they're aggressively raising prices, and this thing called PBMs, pharmaceutical benefit managers, are sort of a new thing we're learning about. They've been around for a long time, but they are giving kickbacks and rebates to health insurance companies, to the state of Minnesota, but they are charging more for these rebates. And we're learning about this now. So the state of Minnesota is going through this licensing reform in both the House and the Senate to say, look, what are you folks doing? They're a big part of the problem of rising costs of pharmaceuticals. Your cost of your pills are the most expensive cost in healthcare. It's more than hospital stays, it's more than going to the doctor. So this is a huge issue. So what we hope to do is to look at those kind of things, lowering the cost of what drives our costs up so much, so we can actually get rid of a provider tax, a sick tax, which is only paid for by the people that are going to see the doctor. If you're healthy, you're lucky. You don't have to go see a doctor. You don't have to pay those prices. So it's a big issue. I'd like to see it sunset, but we can't do it unless we have a pretty decent plan to go forward.
Yeah. And I'm going to add and talk a little bit what Dave's talking about when he talks about pharmaceutical companies, because everybody's been paying. And you guys are probably the smartest group of high school kids I've ever seen, but whatever.
That's why I told you guys, you guys. Yeah.
Because when I was 18, never mind. But in all honesty, Dave and I, the thing that gets you as sitting in this position, and I've said this again and again, but I'm not much of a politician, right? I'm gonna tell you the truth and what I believe, right? I have been approached by opioid companies, and Dave worked really hard on the opioid bill. If you guys have all been paying attention to that and how much work this guy put into that, it's amazing. But they do not like this. They do not like the work that we did on the opioid bill, and it was kind of an eye-opener for me. And honestly, it was kind of fun to look at a pharmaceutical company in the face and say, I don't care what you think. We're going to do this because it's what's right for Minnesota and right for people. So, anyways, off topic again. Sorry.
All right, so we're going to move on to our second question. Philip will be asking this question, and so this is about House File 5 and Senate File 1060, which is the paid family leave bill. So Philip, do you want to ask that question?
So, Senator Lang, do you support paid family leave?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, of course, you support paid family leave. When it comes to House File 5, we're talking about something different. House File 5 is a huge expansion of paid family leave, right? It's 12 weeks of well, it's not vacation, but it's your employer is paying for 12 weeks of. I'm trying to remember the verbiage off of 5, but it says something along the lines of anybody that health, welfare, sick and dying parents.
Child care, elder care, disability,
right,
addiction
there you go.
care, and medical leave.
Yeah, right.
Perfect verbiage.
Yep.
This is on top of whatever the employer is offering as of right now. It's going to be state mandated. It also has 12 weeks of additional attached to it, so that's 24 weeks. Within the last 2 days, I've had a bunch of businesses, local businesses from Willmar, saying, please vote against this. This is something we cannot afford. I tend to agree with that. There was a movement a few years ago, if you remember the preemption bill, where we talked it was all part of the $15 an hour minimum wage movement, and part of that was the paid family leave. And I think the real eye-opener for me on that one, and you talk about local businesses, but what about businesses that are in Minneapolis and St. Paul, right? And it was on the construction, the non-union construction workers group that comes and sees us. And there was a guy from Minneapolis and a guy from St. Paul there. And they came into my office and they said, hey, we're against this $15 an hour minimum wage. And I said, construction trades, those guys gotta pay their. And he says, oh, no, we pay our guys more than $15 an hour already. That's not the issue. Because they pay a lot more than $15 an hour. He goes, the paid family leave. We couldn't cope with that. And he goes, I've been a St. Paul. Well, the one guy had been a St. Paul resident whole life, and the other guy had moved from northern Minnesota down to Minneapolis. But anyways, he said we would just simply pick up and move. We would move someplace else. And to me, that's a scary I mean, if you're enabling laws and making people move to get away from your laws, I think we're in a strange boat there. So what I would say is it's a great idea, right? Everybody wants to be able to have that time off. Everybody wants to spend the time with their families. So what I've talked about in the past, and again, Dave's on Health and Human Services, so I probably would look to him to offer a bill like this. But what I've talked about in the past is have some sort of a insurance program that's sponsored and guaranteed by the state, and have employees pay into that if they're willing to do so. So they have a little bit of skin in the game, saying, I've been paying into this insurance program because I know that my parents are 75 years old and they're, not long for the world, or I have, sick kids, or whatever the problem may be. And I'm going to start paying into this little by little and start building up a little bit of credit. And hopefully the pool of people that would, just like anything else, when you spread the cost across a bunch of people, the cost per individual goes down. So I've talked about that a little bit. Putting this on the backs of employers would probably be a bad idea. I think we would see a lot of businesses suffering from that. I went over time again, didn't I? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're okay. Dave Baker, the same question for you.
The Paid Family Leave Act, again, is a benefit that a lot of companies are already offering people. As an employer myself, I have about 49 employees. I do a lot of different things for my employees, and what I don't like is the government telling me how to take care of my employees, quite simply. Do I think this is a good idea? Of course I do. I think it's a great idea. I actually do it already in many levels. I can't do it with every employee because my business in the service industry, which is hotels and restaurant, it's something that we don't have the ability to. Again, I think this idea was to put a new tax on employers and employees to share it 50-50. So it goes into this account. Now, what the idea of House File 5 is, they're going to have to hire about 400 people to manage this in the state of Minnesota. It's a very complex IT system. It's kind of like unemployment insurance. So we're going to collect this tax from both employer and employee, which, by the way, has changed, and now it's just the employer to pay this. So it's going to put more burden on the employer. We're going to have to try to make it up by raising prices. So for me, that's charging more for a hamburger or maybe a bottle of beer or something, and to try to make up for this so that I can't have my flexibility as an employer to say to my employees, hey, I'm going to give you guys extra free food when you come into work. So I have to take some benefits away because the state is mandating how I take care of my employees. So that's the part that I have the biggest trouble with. I love being an employer in Minnesota, but I will tell you, as an employer, it's hard when the laws and the mandates and the penalties start stacking up. And I understand when people tell you, like, I don't need to do this anymore. I've been doing my own business for about 18 years, and I love it. But after a while, it wears you out. And I will tell you that I think I'm a good employer. I love my employees. I respect them more than anything. I get on them when they're not doing their job, but I also reward them, and I always say good morning and hello and pat them on the back when I can. But what I don't like is for someone to tell me how much I got to pay everybody and how much all the benefits I have to offer. Because I might have a sweet deal somewhere else that nobody else is offering, and I feel like a special employer. So I just don't like that anybody has to tell me what to do with employees. I think it's a really good idea. Now, the last couple years we've been talking about like sick and safe and taking people off. I don't want people coming to work if they're sick. So I've actually have a program with our operation at the Oaks. If you can't come in, we're going to try to work with you to make sure you get the time off and not lose some of that pay. Now, it happens rarely because these folks really like to work and they want to work. But we're trying to be better employers, but as this conversation goes along, I think we have to pause to just remember, where does the money come from? And it's going to be 400 people of new people that we have to hire in the state of Minnesota that's going to just manage this mammoth program. So right now I've got a lot of heartburn and concerns about that bill. Thank you.
All right, and so we are only going to give 1 minute for follow-up questions for the sake of time. And so just grace with that. We'll
Sure.
give you,
Yeah.
We're not expecting a great answer from that, but
It'll be amazing. Just hang on.
so
Buckle in.
can I ask the follow-up for Senator Lang? Then I've got it for Representative Baker. Okay. So 1 minute for Senator Lang. So I've done a little bit of research on this, and I have a few pamphlets here, and of course I don't know everything. I haven't had that much time to research.
You are a page. You should know everything in the state.
I wish. But so, from what I understand, this would be a small payroll contribution of about 0.31% from workers and employees of their wages, which is about, I think, $2 a week. And that would be paid into a statewide insurance pool for, as far as I'm aware, both workers and employers, which is up to 12 weeks of partial wage replacement, 66% on average. And so, do you, more specifically, besides this exact bill, do you support the idea of a statewide insurance pool with about 0.31% from both employers and workers?
I don't like you just said. I don't know if I think though I've seen those talking points as well, actually, and I think that was part of the way to try and get this House File 5 passed. Oftentimes, I think that the pool of people that would be utilizing it in those certain statistics that you're referencing is very small. Like all other government programs, at least in in the ones that I've been working on, the ones that I deal with, oftentimes the pool gets a lot bigger. And I know you're going to go on to CCAP after this, and that's a great example of where that program has ballooned so huge since 1993 when it was initiated, that understandingly so, I would be in support of a statewide pool where the employees are paying for it, but not when the state's going to pick that tab up because they're committed to the $2 a week and the cost is $100 a week. That would be my biggest concern. So look at that, I'm on time.
Good job.
Yeah.
Okay.
For Representative Baker, what do you think you could do to change, like, to make you like paid family leave more?
Well, again, part of what we've talked about is not everybody's going to take advantage of those time off. I mean, young families will because they're going to have babies and things happen. I just don't know that everybody's going to have. It's like having vacation time. You have to have a reason to use this, and if they're going to be paying into it, you have to have a reason. But let's just say that you work for 10 more years and you've been fortunate enough to not have any deaths or a good thing would be births in your family or time off. You just can't say, I want to take my personal time off. You have to have legitimate reasons. A lot of people wouldn't get that. Something might happen. They may be paying in for 10 years and all of a sudden they decide to retire and they're done working. And then they just paid in for something that they didn't get anything in return for. Again, the idea is good, but I don't want to be told how to pay my employees. And I want to fight for other employers that are thinking the way I do. I don't think that's the right way for government to act about our capitalist society. We thrive when business owners like me have elbow room and make money, and we hire more people and pay more money. But the bad employers are the ones who are not going to do something good for their employees because there's an employee shortage. So if we don't do our jobs right, they're going to leave us in a second if we don't respect them and pay them well. So overall, I just don't want the government creating this big program that doesn't pay for everybody. Thank you.
Okay. And then I think, again, for the sake of time, we're going to cut this next question down to around 2 minutes. Again, if you need to finish a couple sentences or whatever, we're not that picky. We just want to make sure we get to everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tina, do you want to just share your story and then do the questions? You don't have to.
Just gonna go with the question. Senator Lane, will you support fully funding CCAP?
No, and here's the reason why. We've been working on this one for a year and a half now. Actually, in my truck, I have the new report from the Office of Legislative Assistant. I'm sorry, I'm looking at you guys, Legislative Auditor.
You stick with
Still
me.
LA.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Apologize. So this is so everybody's aware of the fraud that went on the CCAP. So CCAP is something, like I said before, I saw your question down here, started in 1993 where the Minnesota had started subsidizing childcare, whether it's in centers or and I think it's about 75% of it, isn't it, that goes to centers?
Yes.
Give or take. See, here's my statistics and my memory trying to remember all these things, but I think it's about 75% of it goes to centers. And anyways, there's been a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse in that CCAP program. Anybody that's seen the news over the last year has seen a wide range of values of what that fraud looked like. I think there's $6 or $7 million right now of convictions of people that have defrauded the system. And ultimately, we don't know because the group of investigators internally and through the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension is so small, they can only investigate a few. What the conclusions that Office of Legislative Auditor came to was that half of the things that they looked at were fraudulent. Half. That's a $320 million program. I think it's 250 some odd goes directly to CCAP. So if that was to hold true, even in the 7-county metro area, which is where most of it was located, most of the fraud, which, honestly, would be upwards of $100 million. And that's the number that was used in the hearings that Dave and I sat through with the whistleblower. If you remember the whistleblower? What the Office of Legislative Auditor said is, all I can confirm is the $7 million, $6 million of stuff that's been convicted through that investigation office. So, there's a couple of things as a legislature that we can do. We can write laws or we can affect money. That's all we can do. We can't criminally prosecute somebody. We can't question them on where they were on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. We just can't do it. So in this case with CCAP, what we did is we said this year we're going to cut your funding. I think we went from 240 down to about $170 million, which does not, it hopefully doesn't affect the program too greatly. But it gives the Department of DHS about a year, because that funding does go in next year. The funding level stays the same throughout the biennium. So the problem with that is DHS hasn't done anything in a year. They haven't done anything. They haven't done anything to try and fix the fraud. I'm sorry, I'm going way over, aren't I?
Yeah.
God, I'm sorry. But anyways, what this does is allows the legislature the 1 or 2 tools that we have to say, no, you're going to fix this. In the meantime, you have a year. And that's where we're at with that.
So same question to me?
Yes.
Okay, CCAP. CCAP kind of stands for Child Care Assistance Program, for people that might be watching online and just kind of don't know what that is. We had a lot of alarms go off about a year ago to people that were filling in fake papers and telling them their kids were here and they really weren't. So that's where this fraud has gotten into. And I think what I've seen in talking to daycare providers out in this area here, I pick up the phone and I'll say, hey, what do you guys do to track your kids? And I think everybody does it a little different. Some people have digital systems, some people have a notebook they write down on, and I don't think it's consistent. So I think we have a problem with how do we track our kids, because it's too easy to defraud the government, because it's hard for them to check up on everything. I want to see the program continue. I don't think we should fully fund it until we get it right.
I should have said that too.
Work with me. You got to follow me, buddy. All right. So anyway, that just generally what I think we should try to do is just let's fix it before we expand it. I have employees working for me that utilize this. So if it went away, I would lose employees. And I've been talking this whole time, I can't lose any employees. So it's a good program, but it's got some areas that we need to tighten down. So before we spend more money on it, I want to make sure we get it right so that the accountability is right. And if you do defraud the government for this kind of thing, I think there should be a whopping penalty. You should sit your tail in jail, because there's a problem here. If you are trying to take money from taxpayers, I have no patience for that. But again, that is one of the programs that assists employers to put people in my businesses and other businesses that I want to continue to support. It's not perfect, but I pay more taxes because of that. But again, it's all about that balance. When we were talking about family paid leave, I want to help those that need that help. But for everybody else, I don't think that's the right thing to do with the family paid. This is an important program I want to see continue.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
Just to add to what Dave was saying too is, this is not, you'll maybe hear me say this in the future and in the past both, but there's always about the hard right and the easy wrong, right? The easy wrong would say, let DHS handle it, let them fix it. The hard right is knowing that YMCA out here takes about $100,000 a year in CCAP money, and knowing that we're going to cut that because this fraud needs to be taken care of. That's a hard right. That's a hard decision for me to make, saying I'm going to support that because we need to fix this problem. So that's it.
Okay, and then we have a follow-up question, which again will be 1 minute
Sure.
for each of you. So this is a bit of a long question, but I did some research into the CCAP fraud, and according to NPR, the news that I found was that in March, Fox 9 released a series of articles saying that there was like $100 million of child care aid fraud money. And Fox 9 claimed that it was being funneled to terrorist organizations back in East Africa. The legislative auditor, James Noble, stated that the fraud was exaggerated and they could find no evidence that any fraud money was going to Somalia or terrorist groups. Many people believe that this is a narrative that unfairly drives Islamophobia and fear of many immigrants, and that believe that these articles are unfairly driving that specific narrative. What are you doing to stop narratives like this? What are you doing to stop narratives that unfairly drive Islamophobia? And we'll start with Baker.
For me, I don't engage in those conversations a whole lot because I don't believe in it. I think that if people want to have fears, that can't change how they think. I don't have it. I work with East Africans and Latinos and Caucasians and Hmong in the cities. I don't care about the diversity and how this sounds on the radio or the TV. But I know a lot of people are concerned about, oh geez, because this had a tagline with the Somalian community, that it's all of a sudden the worst thing ever. No, it's about fraud. What they do with that money, I don't even care. You know, if they're doing the wrong thing with it, they're taking our money. So that's a real problem for me. No matter what they do with it, if they're buying cars or homes, or if they're giving it to friends and family to do some bad things, I mean, we have to make sure that we don't engage in that. I don't like that terminology. I don't want to engage in it. I live in a community that's full of color and diversity, and I'm really proud to be that. But I'm also not gonna get all concerned about those talking points, those high level points. So I just don't like to engage in that. So
Right.
And then the same question.
So this is a strange thing that came to us. So we had a whistleblower. The whistleblower, I think he has some strong evidence. I think he has some strong opinions. James Nobles, I'd like to comment on him a little bit, is one of the most pristine guys when it comes to opinion, when it comes to fact.
he's the legislative auditor.
He is a legislative auditor, Jim Nobles. He is a nonpartisan guy. He doesn't give a rip what color your voting record is. He doesn't care.
Facts.
He's all about the facts. And I truly appreciate that, and I'm gonna tout the military for just a split second as I refer to that, because I would say that the way that I grew up, in the military, the way that we don't care if your skin is black, white, purple, whatever, it doesn't matter, because you're all equally worthless in the eyes of the military, right? That's what they always say. But it's true. But at the end of the day, I don't care either. That's the ultimate. I don't know. You hear it on both sides of the aisle, right? Whether it's there was no evidence from Jim Nobles because he doesn't have that availability to go that far. He doesn't. And once cash is cash, how are you going to track it, right? You're not going to be able to track it. So where it went to who it went to, we don't know. We really don't. Like I said before, we don't know in the investigation how much money was actually fraudulent. We just didn't have the capability of investigating it. Hopefully we don't need that capability in the future. Hopefully DHS takes a hold of this and really gets a handle on it. When it comes to narratives, I hope that I don't ever perpetuate any narratives. I don't think I do. My blood runs pretty red, white, and blue for the most part, and I try to stick to that. And but I'll say that though, if somebody's fraudulent, I think they're going to be held to the same standards that anybody else should be held to. So I don't know if that's a good answer, but.
And then for our last section, we only have one question, and that'll be for Representative Lang, and then we're going to move on to our closing. So.
You're not going to ask me this question either?
No, you'll see why in a second.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is regarding HF 1500, and it was a bill allowing immigrants to apply for driver's licenses. This bill was introduced into the Senate and referred to your committee, Transportation, Finance, and Policy. So I have to try to lean over for this. Will you support this bill through committee and if it comes to the floor?
Well, it would never go through committee because it was introduced the day before deadline. So that is an issue in itself. When it comes to the floor, it would have to come in the form of an amendment. The amendment probably would be non-germane just because it doesn't deal with anything that we've even discussed in the Senate. When it comes between the House and the Senate, that's politic talk, I know.
Very procedural stuff.
It's
but
procedural stuff, but and I would admit that it probably was done intentionally that way, is dropped the last day, because this is an argument that's been going on for 3 years while I've been here. And the truth of it is, no, I will not support this. I've been very open about that. When it comes to driver's license for immigrants, there is a way to get a driver's license, and there's a way to do it as long as you are going through the process, becoming an immigrant
Citizen.
or becoming a citizen. You can have a provisional driver's license. So, and that's, 6 months ago, I was just talking to Dave about this yesterday. 6 months ago, we sat through a naturalization process here in Willmar. And I think there was about 40 people that took the oath of citizenship.
Tears
Yeah.
pouring down their face.
Right.
It was an emotional day for all
And-
of us. It
and-
was great.
I have to admit, it was pretty moving. It really was. It was something that I didn't really know what to expect when I went in the room, but there was this guy, and I think he was from Portugal or Colombia, one of the two. And the greatest thing ever, had a red, white, and blue American flag button-up shirt on with a big belt buckle, and he was an interesting guy, and he was just super emotional about it. But if anybody saw the video, that guy, anyways, that's the way to do it. That is the correct way. I truly believe that in this state and in this nation, we have a system of laws. I think those laws have worked great for 200 and almost 50 or over 50 years. Whatever. Can't even do the math. No, not 50. I'm sorry. I was born in the 70s, so it's not 50. But I think that is I've been pretty. And honestly, the rest of the district feels the same way about that. This is overwhelmingly, my position is overwhelmingly supported. So, and even if I had no personal opinion on it, if I was to vote just constituents, that's the way the vote would go. So.
All right, and for Representative Baker, the reason we didn't ask you this question is because you already did support House File 1500 as it passed through House, and so we want to thank you for doing that for our community.
Can I just take a moment to explain why, just if I could, just one moment?
Yeah.
So when the House bill, and I've been supportive of this basically since I went to the legislature 5 years ago. I've talked to police departments and I've talked to my mayor and learned a lot about this. This is one of those issues that was probably the hardest vote for me to take. But when it came to the House floor, I was not going to support it because it was lousy. But we made a lot of good changes to it that Representative Winkler, the chief author, was willing to make for us. After that, we accepted it in a much more cleaner version because what I really care about is safe roads. And there's a lot of people living here, working here, that are driving, and I'm afraid that they're driving without a license and they're not being trained, and then they can't buy insurance. So I'm supporting this concept, and I hope someday it does work out. I don't know that this is the year to do it, but there's a lot of passion about this. But I really respect what Senator Lang is still his core beliefs are. The difference between Senator Lang and he's got a military background, black and white. I have a hospitality background, right? And so the difference is I work with a lot of these folks. Now, I don't hire illegal folks because that's against the law, and I don't do that. But I know these families, I know these people, but I support both positions, and it took me a lot of political courage to step away from my party to say this is the right thing to do, and it's not easy to do that. But I also respect somebody like Senator Lang to say I can't support that. It means that we also agree, he and I, on 99 out of 100 issues. This is one we aren't on the same page with. But I respect everything that everybody decides on this, but it's a challenging question because of other things involved in this thing. So we have an immigration system that's really broken. We got to fix that. That's on the DC people, and they're not doing anything about it. So our job, and everybody's job here, is to talk to your congressmen and your U.S. senators. Get this fixed.
And
Because Minnesota should not have had to take a vote for this.
I think I'd like to add on that just for a second, if I can. That is actually the root of the problem. And, I've been doing this for 2.5 years, 3 years now. And that was the one thing that I learned in a quick hurry, is that the immigration process, I think, takes somewhere along 7 years to immigrate legally. That's just too long. And I've said that before, and I really mean that. At the end of the day, I want everybody to sit in the barn theater and go through an immigration naturalization process and take that oath to the Constitution. It was pretty neat. I think ultimately that's the goal, right? In Minnesota right now, we're really struggling with population growth. We haven't had much population growth. We're about 300,000 in the last decade. Houston, Texas grew 300,000 in the last decade. One city. We're having an issue with that. And you know, when it comes to workforce, like Dave was talking about, or when it comes to when it comes to revenue of the state to pay for things like CCAP, to pay for things like 2 and 2 on the formula to go to the schools, that all has to do with population. And we don't have that population. We're a small state.
And I hate
So-
to cut you off.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
But we have to get to our closing quickly, so you
Sure.
guys can be leaving here by
Thank you.
8:50. We know
Thank
you
you.
have something else to get to. So we have 3 minutes for our closing. We just wanted to thank you for coming and talking to us. It means a lot. To
Don't
get
they do a nice job? These guys do a great job, and thank you. It's a good foreman to do this. Thank you.
It means a lot to get to have some accountability with you guys. And so I'm not sure we'll have time for our popcorn style recap, which is something that we usually do, just say a word about how we feel, but we might just ask you to share just one word about how this forum has been for you. And then we have one more question.
One word for me, enlightened, and I want to say encouraged. I really love that you young folks are engaged in this process. That only helps us all, and I hope that you're coming in with this with an open mind and an open heart, so that when we explain things that maybe we don't agree with, that you'll at least allow us to have the time to tell our story and why we think the way we think. We talked about this last time we did the thing during the election. And I think that it helped people hear my perspective of things, because I learned from Senator Lang when he talks about things differently than I do, because he has a different experience. So I'm sorry it was more than one word, but this is engaging, and I want to thank you for doing this.
No, I appreciate it. You know, this is the whole Senate thing, the whole running for political office was nothing I ever even thought about doing. It really wasn't. It wasn't something I ever wanted to be. It's been a strange 3 years. It'll be a strange 4-year term. It's a crazy job that we do. It really is. Best case scenario, we make 6 out of 10 people happy. Best case. And the 4 people that you make upset are usually the loudest, and they're going to scream at you, and that's the way it is. And I personally don't take that too well. You know, if anybody sat through the meeting that the driver's freedom to drive, and you saw me, I didn't take that well. I took that tough. You know, and we have local citizens from Montevideo that really have an issue with the way I'm going to vote and really have a life-changing thing. And that's the way my vote's going to go, and that's the way it's going to stay. But it affects them. And ultimately, I hope that, you know, on that one particular topic, I hope that they go through the immigration process. I really do. So, and I know that's it's a really long, semi-vague answer, but...
Can you sum it up in one word?
Oh, yes. So, and appreciative. I'm really glad you guys did this. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.
No, I appreciate it.
You did a great job.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.